Forrest.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is actually not up to the government via ACMA to decide or dictate what the truth actually is. And I'm proud that we, the Coalition, oppose this draconian legislation and will repeal it in government. Because freedom of speech is an absolute fundamental to our democracy. By contrast, it is the clear intent of the Labor government to censor, silence, control, fine and punish Australians for our online content by imposing and enforcing obligations on digital platforms. This is the most anti-democratic, anti-free speech legislation I've seen since coming into this parliament in 2007. I actually never thought I'd see the day when in this country, a proud country which is globally acknowledged and highly respected as a liberal democratic society, that we would be debating a bill that is explicitly designed to censor and silence the Australian people, to deny us our freedom of speech and freedom of opinion, to deny Australians the right to frank and fearless, honest debates. We need to hear the views of people we disagree with. But what I believe that Labor is really doing is preventing anyone who disagrees with the government from having their say, especially in the run to the election. The government will control what we read, see, hear and share online in the election campaign via ACMA. Labor is seeking to directly prevent anyone who disagrees with the government from having their say. A bill that strikes at the very heart of free speech. This is the key pillar of Australia's hard-fought-for and protected democratic freedoms and liberties. You know, over 103,000 Australian servicemen and women have fought and died for our democratic values. One of those was my sister's dad, my mother's husband, who was killed in Papua New Guinea in World War II. They fought to protect and preserve our healthy, functioning democracy, a democracy that not only requires but should demand freedom of speech, where a diversity of ideas, views and opinions right across the ideological and political spectrum are encouraged, openly discussed, both agreed with and disagreed with. However, the Labor government has decided to deliberately silence its own citizens, to legally enforce and silence debate designed to shut down debate on issues that matter to Australians, and to deny us from the right to informed choice. Our informed choice will only be what the government approves of. This bill will deliberately suppress and remove online debate by Australians. Unfortunately, once again, Labor is determined to divide us as they tried to do with The Voice. This time, however, Labor is dividing us by the chosen ones who will have the right to freedom of speech online and those of us who will not have the right to freedom of speech online. Labor's special chosen ones, those who will have the right to freedom of speech, no matter what they say, will be academics, scientists, artists, the people who Labor clearly believe have a superior intellect and intelligence to the rest of us. Labor's chosen ones will have the right to free speech on key and critical issues that matter to all Australians, even if it is misinformation and disinformation around critical political, health, social, economic and every other issue. Imagine not being able to disagree online about budget decisions, climate policies, Labor's renewables-only energy policy, women's safe spaces and anything else, in fact. Those of us who are not the chosen ones will be bound by Labor's broad definitions of misinformation and disinformation enforced by ACMA, Labor's Truth Police unit. Misinformation, which is described as information that is reasonably verifiable as false, misleading or deceptive. Disinformation has the same definition but also adds the content with grounds to suspect the person is sharing it intends that the content deceive or it involves inauthentic behaviour. Well, good luck with that. The rules for this will be dictated by whatever the government and its Truth Police ACMA dictate. Gone will be our right to share our genuinely and honestly held opinions through frank and fearless discussion and open access to the great contest and ideas and diversity of opinions online. For practical purposes, the Labor government will direct and empower ACMA to force online platforms to remove content before Australians are actually allowed to see the content. Can you just imagine how the Chinese government will be rubbing its hands at the opportunity it will have to instruct TikTok to remove massive amounts of Australians' legitimate content online? That will be content that the Chinese government doesn't approve of. It will be removed under the protection provided by this Labor legislation to curate China's own message or propaganda. And we will never know exactly what the Chinese government has removed because it'll be gone before we see it. It's madness. And we will see the major American platforms controlling and removing Australians' content online, outsourced probably to fact-checkers like the discredited, politically biased RMIT Fact Check. We will not be allowed to see, hear, read or share alternative views and opinions online. The online platforms will be forced by law to remove any of this before we're even allowed to see it. Now, I have great respect for Chris Merritt, the Vice President of the Rule of Law Institute of Australia, who said good law must be clear and certain with requirements that are capable of being known in advance, not determined by officials. He also said one of the fundamental features of Australia's system of government is that everyone has a responsibility to make their own assessments about public policy debates. That means accepting that part of the price of living in a free society is that flawed ideas should be free to circulate alongside those that are worthy. Telling the difference is the role of an informed citizenry, not governments and their officials. That's exactly what this government is trying to do. Make no mistake, this is complex and simply bad legislation. And we actually won't know what's been removed, what we're missing out on, because we won't see it at all. The platforms will have wiped it off before we see it. And we won't even know when ACMA, Labor's Truth Police, get it wrong, when they force platforms to remove information that later proves to be true. We won't even know what truthful original information was there, because we won't see it in the first place. I can't find any process or publication of removed information, no penalties or outcomes for the Truth Police, ACMA, when they get it wrong, which they will, or who or what will monitor, measure and report on ACMA's decisions. Who will adjudicate or decide that the government, ACMA, the platforms, the fact-checkers have made a mistake in removing what is accurate information or that later evidence provides that it was true? Will those posts and comments be reinstated and fines repaid? Who will represent the rights of ordinary Australians in this instance? What will the penalties be for the removal of accurate information? Will there be damages paid to the individuals and all platforms affected? And who will pay, and will it be Australian taxpayers? The legislation and definitions are so broad, you could drive what my family would call a D11 dozer through them. They're so wide-ranging, open-ended and subjective. Terms such as grounds to suspect, reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm or the intention to deceive. Now, I couldn't find any definition or test for what actually constitutes reasonably verifiable or false, misleading or deceptive. Simply put, the truth will be what the Labor government via ACMA says that it is. And you know what concerns me is Labor is also doing this because they think Australians are stupid, that we are so stupid we can't work out for ourselves whether what we see, read, hear online is accurate, reasonable, or it is extreme and wrong. Now, I've done hundreds of cyber safety presentations to kids, and I asked the kids, how many of you believe that everything you read, see and hear online is true? Very few hands have ever gone up, no matter what the age group is. And I encourage the kids to develop their own critical thinking. But if kids understand this, why doesn't this current government? Why does the government think that we are really all so stupid we don't understand that not everything we read, see and hear online is true? Okay, we don't have the common sense. That's what I think the government believes. Australia is a democracy, and that's something that I take very seriously. We actually have the right of freedom of speech and to develop our own critical thinking and judgment. That's part of our responsibility as adults. to decide and work out the difference between fact and fiction. We have the right to actively decide what games, platforms, apps, sites, digital technologies we use and which to stay away from. The importance of media and information literacy should be encouraged, not discouraged, by simply cowering behind and being controlled by ACMA or Labor's truth police like zombies who can't think and act for ourselves, who in fact needs to have a big brother government on our shoulders every single minute of the day or whenever we're online. It is not up to the government to decide what the truth is. But I am very concerned about this legislation. It is not right that we only see what the government believes we have a right to see. I don't want to be living in a vacuum, a political vacuum or any other form of vacuum. I don't want to see anything designed to suppress alternative political or other opinions or to filter out alternative views. I don't want to see anything designed to stop us disagreeing with the government of the day online. Labor wants to make sure that any future referendum, unfortunately, they propose is probably never defeated again by a 60-40 majority by the Australian people by controlling what information we get to see. We will never see those alternative views online or the truth, again creating division in Australia. The chosen ones who can express all of their views online and the rest of us who cannot. Now, this is not okay that the Labor government is dividing us by those they think who are smart or intelligent enough to know what is accurate online, the media, the academics, the scientists, the artists, those involved in parody or satire. They actually must have have superior intelligence. These people can say what they like online, right or wrong. Whether it's Labor's definition of misinformation or disinformation, they can share it. Academics can have two opposing opinions, but ordinary Australians, can't discuss this online. So, if you're a neurosurgeon, a doctor, a pharmacist, a lawyer, a heavy-duty mechanic, a nurse, a teacher, a retail worker, an aged care or childcare worker, or so many others, who will have the right in there? But we are the ones, unfortunately, the Labor government believes that they can dictate what we can and can't read, see, hear or share online. Unfortunately, we will see Canberra-based bureaucrats setting up a totally new bureaucracy to actually police this. I take great exception to Australians' freedom of speech in any way, shape or form being compromised. And I don't want to see Australians living in an information bubble that is controlled by Canberra-based bureaucrats. I mean, I'm not sure quite what qualifies those in ACMA to be the only ones who know what the truth actually is. I really object to this. And I cannot imagine what would have happened in Western Australia under what was the then Labor government's horrendous Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act if this legislation was actually enforced and the people who highlighted the many problems that were embedded in that act, if they weren't able to air those online. And this is what the risk is, that the information we will get will be only that the government of the day wants us to have. And I would have to say, are we living in Australia or China?
Good point.
It's a good point. Australia or Russia? I chose to live in Australia. I love the place and I love the rights and freedoms, and every time we do a citizenship ceremony, the freedom of speech comes up as one of the things that we are so proud of and that we should in this place be protecting at all costs. Those rights and freedoms that people from around the world come here to be able to enjoy that they can't often in the country that they've come from. And here we are discussing something that is actually putting at risk those, or deliberately putting at risk those rights. Fake news has been around forever in all sorts of forms, forever. It is up to each one of us to decide what that is and to act accordingly. It is not up to the government to decide what the truth is, and I am profoundly concerned that this bill is even before the House.